Welcome, Kara, to the 21st episode of Unleash the Knowledge's podcast, Everyday Extraordinary, where it's my job to push the message that we all have extraordinary capabilities within us that simply need to be channeled and activated. I do this by having amazing conversations with everyday extraordinary people like yourself. So thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, you are the new author, the new best-selling Wall Street Journal, author of Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters. It seems like every time I hop on social media, whether that's Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram, there's a new award or a new piece of praise from a reputable individual sharing the love about the book. I've gained so much wisdom from it, and I really appreciate the time and effort that you put into writing the book and pushing it out to all of us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. And honestly, I would have written the book a long time ago if I would have known that it would have been really helpful to people. So that's probably the most surprising thing about this book that I've gained over the last month since it's come out, is really how many people have been reaching out to me, who most of them I don't know, and they're like, whoa, this really helped me to get through X. And so that's really it hits here, right? Like it's an awesome thing to know that you're helping people.
Definitely. And personally, I really resonated with it. Before we hop into questions, I just want to quickly note these like mental self-talk questions and phrases that you always let pop up in your head. I've had this, I do this personally for myself. Questions like, what's the worst that could happen? In the
Mm-hmm.
end, it might be some lost time, but there's always something to gain through an experience. At least that's the way I like to carry my own life. And then, the one that is kind of like, I guess, your buzz phrase of no means maybe and maybe means yes. That's super incredible and extremely empowering. And we'll dive into those a little bit. But I did want to note that, the book is not some, you know, most of these business memoirs or, I don't know, they steer a little bit away from the mental and psychology kind of aspect of what it means to be an entrepreneur and the daily struggles and the overcoming all these obstacles, especially the self-doubt, which obviously your book is centered around, where, everything could be going good on the outside, but internally you could be having this battle. So really want to applaud you for that. And I think just through reading it, we do have a ton of similarities as far as being curious and always asking questions and being okay with maybe barging through a door and getting face to face with someone, if that is what it means to get the meeting. I mean, I've had my own fair share of experiences of hopping into rooms just because they had a light on and I figured someone was in there to answer my question. But I think this book will hopefully ignite a fire in a lot of people that don't quite already have these mental skills and thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think to your point, I felt like I was on this journey that perhaps was a bit different than how others have really, maybe the light that they've shined on their journey. And I've had so many people recently talk to me about authentic leadership and how that there's so many people out there that are, they didn't just get there to be the unicorn, or even when they failed, maybe there were some things along the way that there was a decision making point that they had to make that maybe they made that they regretted, right? Along the way. And I feel like I've met so many of those different founders, entrepreneurs in my journey in the last 15 years. And that's where I've gained the most learning. And I've also realized in my own journey that just those little nuggets when I've shared with other entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs that are thinking about it, I've shared things that I've learned along the way that are so important. And I think that the more we can talk about that, call it authentic leadership or something else, being real, I think that people gain a lot more responsibility, strength, and overall get educated about it really is about trying, and it's about being okay with a little bit of failure and knowing that if you don't try, then you'll never be able to get ultimately where you want to go.
I love that. And I'm really glad you said that before we get into questions, because unfortunately the millennials, the Gen Zs, they see the social media lifestyle. And unfortunately that is a false reality. It's the highlight reel. And there's a lot of people tapping into entrepreneurship, whether that's in the realm of online businesses and businesses, not that's not face to face, it's behind the phone, whatever that may be. And it might look exciting. I mean, it's
Mhm.
100% exciting, but it may look easy and it may look like you're sitting on a beach relaxing. So I think there definitely needs to be far more authentic leadership and just, more realness by all means, on social media in our daily lives. So I'm glad you noted on that. That's very, very powerful.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we see even over the last week companies going public and there's these are amazing stories, but I love looking back at some of the stories while they were just getting started, right? And
Yes.
why did things happen and what mistakes did they make? And again, I think that more and more people need to know that at the end of the day, it's a lot of hard work. And as I say to so many people, whether they're students or they're, existing entrepreneurs, that there's way easier ways to make money than being an entrepreneur. And if you feel like your curiosity needs to be satisfied by going and solving this problem that you see out there, that's one thing. But to actually go and launch a company because you think that they're going to go public and go tomorrow basically it's just wrong. It's just never what happens. And so I think that again, more of these stories, not to scare people, but also to really let people know that there's a lot more in between. And frankly, like I said, there's more learnings, there's more stuff that goes on, but you can't just snap your finger and just go build a company. And particularly one thing that I've really noticed along the way of building Hint is that I not only was launching a company, but what no one sort of shared with me early on, and I figured this out after we got it on the shelf at our, first supermarkets, the Whole Foods, was that I was not only launching a product and a company, but also an entirely new category. And so many of the companies that you see that are, game changing, like the Airbnbs of the world, or even a Facebook or a company like Hint, those were brand new categories. And the challenge with brand new categories and why it's maybe even, a Mount Everest to add to an existing, building out a company, is that the consumer hasn't seen anything like this before, right? So in our case, it was unsweetened flavored water. And so while I had a small audience initially from day one that was writing to me, that was calling me saying, "Oh my gosh, I love your product Hint," that audience was still super small. The first thing that people were saying to me when I said, "Hey, here's Hint, it's an unsweetened flavored water," and they would say, "What's it sweetened with?" Because all drinks outside of plain water had some sort of sweetener. And I'm like, "There's no sweetener." And they were like, "I don't get it. Like, how can you have a drink with fruit in it that doesn't have sweeteners in it?" And so when you're launching an entirely new category like unsweetened flavored water, you got to wait for the consumer to catch up. And you can't throw a bunch of advertising at them and say, "I've just spent hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising, like, step up, start using my product, start drinking my product." It just doesn't work that way. So again, there's definitely a, kind of formula, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in. It's sort of that same story, and one that I just have found so fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, wow. I mean, you're so right. And it's one thing to start the business, but and the product can be fantastic whether it's known or it's not, like yours, but there's still that area or that timeline where you need to give the early adopters some time to enjoy it and then spread the word and then get those next set of people to really like it, to really just be introduced to it. But you're right, you know, you can't, I don't think you can rush, you can't rush product market fit, and you also can't rush community building. You know, that's like something that
Totally.
it will come over time. But um awesome, that's so cool. That's, I mean, I've I'm a big water drinker. I'll say that flat out. But I did have hint when you guys sent me a six pack, but it was um it was great. I mean, it's definitely something different, and I definitely can see how people that hate drinking the plain water can find some enjoyment with still getting the same nutrients, but get a little taste with it as well. So awesome.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. And when I launched Hint, I mean, it was interesting. To your point, I just didn't like water. I didn't like the taste of water. I aspired to be a water drinker, but I would never drink it. And so I started drinking these diet sodas. And when I realized that diet soda, Diet Coke was my thing, that it just wasn't great for me. When I gave it up, I lost in 2.5 weeks, I lost 24 pounds. My adult acne that I had been struggling with went away. My energy levels went up, and so that's when I really realized that this whole category of diet drinks, which is huge, right, is one that kind of for me equated to health. And I don't know why, but every piece of marketing over the many years that I was drinking it said to me, I'm going to be healthy as long as I drink diet and eat diet. And so, you know, you look at how big that category is, how big enhanced waters that are, whether they're selling you vitamins or collagen or anything else like that, we all think of those as kind of healthier and better for you things. And so I think that the danger is that most of those people who are drinking either of those are actually not the healthiest people in the world. And in fact, major diseases like type 2 diabetes and other things that have cropped up, you know, they they're also a huge audience for the diet industry, right? And these people have been fooled. Like their body is not responding properly to this, yet they're continuing to do it thinking they don't have their eye on the prize, right? They're really, they've been fooled by it. And so that was the epiphany for me, that if it was actually counter to what I had believed, which was counting calories in this diet sweetener, instead just eat real and eat, you know, as pure as possible. And every once in a while, what's interesting is I actually enjoy plain water more now that I moved away from sweeteners. And so that's the other thing that, you know, I talk about is that we sort of filled this gap, and our goal was never to take away the water drinkers. It was instead to take away from these people that were actually fooling people. I call them healthy perception products. And again, whether you're starting a company in the beverage industry or in the diet industry at all, it's you know, kind of looking for, sort of looking around the circle to try and figure out kind of what's going on to develop something new is fun and interesting and satisfies your curiosity, but it's hard because this is not what the consumer is used to hearing.
Yeah, yeah, we got to hop into some questions, but wow, amazing wisdom, and I love the one piece you say in the book that you literally were so interested in building something like this, or having a product like this, or which is when you went to the Coca-Cola executive, you're like, listen, just take the idea, like I just want it made. I don't even need to build it. I just want it made, and I want to consume it. And he's like, no, sorry, lady, or he calls you honey or something. You're like, what? He just called me honey.
Sweetie,
Sweet.
sweetie.
Yeah, I love that. Right through the pages. But that's awesome. That's amazing stuff. So, um, first question I want to ask is: early in the book, you share that your dad was a, you know, someone that always had the hopes to be an entrepreneur, but he never quite took that real step. You know, he had the family, he had to put food on the table, and then you have an older brother, Kevin, who also has gone down that path. So you've had that kind of mindset in the household. I'd love for you to share any advice you can give for someone who might not have that, but can feel the entrepreneur spirit in them? Where can they go seek out this outside the box thinking or risk taking mentality?
Yeah, I think most great entrepreneurs that I've met along the way read a ton. And so it's funny, I was just telling this story the other day that one of our investors that came on about 18 months ago, I had read about her almost 20 years ago. And so I knew her backstory. Her name's Kay Koplovitz, and she was the founder of USA Network. And this was at a time when I was at CNN. And so, of course, everybody was talking about Ted Turner and, he's great and he is great. But I was really super interested in this woman who started USA Network, probably because she was a female executive and one of the few in media at the time. And so when I was getting EY Entrepreneur of the Year award, or I happened to meet her along the way, and I said, "Oh, I know all about you." And I knew her backstory, and I just had admired her from afar. And then ultimately, she had started a fund and ended up investing in us. And again, I think that that's a story of, first of all, I wanted to be educated. I felt like I already knew her. But this was the thing that was so fascinating to me, was that, just by actually reading about her and getting to know her, later on in life, she would end up investing in my company and become a friend of mine. So I think that you can gain, my purpose was to gain knowledge of how to be a better entrepreneur, but you never know when people like that may become your partner as well.
Absolutely. I mean, as you can see, I got all this knowledge behind me. I did the higher ed route. I even got my master's, which, if you knew me in high school, that's such a far-fetched accomplishment, but things lined up where I was able to get a scholarship and I was able to get it done. But to be honest, I've learned most of my knowledge from life experiences and these books, and I treat them as mentors. I treat them as, people across my dining room table, having a conversation with them. And you do say in the book that you were a big reader, and from my research of entrepreneurs and people that have just shaped the world in a positive way, they're all readers, or at least
Mhm.
95% of them are knowledge seekers, is the best way to put it. They've been curious and they wanted to get knowledge of things that they didn't know. So um, that's great advice. If you don't have it in your household, you can easily find a lot. You can find essentially anything in the world in a book. So go seek it out.
Totally. 100%.
So the new book is out, Undaunted, Wall Street Journal bestseller. It's getting so much more praise on a daily basis. If someone were to just come across it on my page, your page, going through Barnes and Noble or Amazon, what's the number one takeaway you're hoping readers can gain after reading your book?
I think the key thing is, just by reading this book, hopefully they'll know that they can do it. And if they just go try. And I, I'm no different than anyone else. I just went out and tried. I didn't have experience in an industry. I had, worked really hard and gained lots of knowledge, but just by reading my story and my journey, hopefully they'll recognize that, hey, if she can do it, I can do it as well.
Awesome. I love that. And you had a couple positions in a job leading up to the start of Hint. I'd love to take a quick time travel back to the early days of when you started, when you went from you and your husband, I believe, who were the origin of the business, to hiring your
Mhm.
first paid employees. Was that Were you able to supplement or be able to provide these employees with a salary because of investors? Was it bootlegged? Like, how was that process of getting actual paid employees to help you scale the business early on?
So, so we self-funded the company initially. I had made some money at AOL, and so more than anything, I decided that I really wanted uh, to kind of get some traction on the business prior to going out and getting investors and giving away portions of the company too early. So that was really the key thing that I wanted to do. And we've always paid people that from day one to not only work at the company, but we also felt like when we started the company and investing in the company, we also had shares. And so unlike kind of a typical beverage company, we were set up more like what my previous experience was in tech, which was giving people equity in the company. I think, frankly, we still have, we're a 15-year-old company. We have some people that have worked here 12, 13 years, and I don't think they really knew what equity was when they first came. They just sort of said, I don't know, there's some paperwork. And that's what we told them. We said, don't worry about it. Just like put it to the side for now. And now they have started to understand it a lot more. So yeah, I mean, I think the model was came very much from tech as compared to beverage or consumer products companies, but it was really a way for us to be able to recruit in Silicon Valley and San Francisco too, some of the better people that we really felt were passionate, because that was really what we were up against. But it ends up that I think we kind of changed a model. I don't think there were very many beverage companies that were doing that early on, so it's you can blame it on us.
You've been a trailblazer. You're creating your own path in many ways. So there's another aspect of how you did that. And you say in the book too, when you got equity through AOL, I believe, or to market, and you didn't even know what it was, and you were like, okay, it sounds good. Let's just go ahead and do this. But obviously, you work hard and you get that kind of piece, which is super valuable. A couple of years down the road, if things all go well. So I'm sure everyone's been pleased they took that step early on with you guys and trusted the process, and then has been able to reap the benefits today.
Definitely.
So, we talked a little bit about this earlier in the intro, that entrepreneurs are, they take risks. They're fearless, or at least that's the notion, or the label that they get in today's world, which is by all means true, but there's other aspects to it as well. And in Daunted, you talk a lot about your own doubts and fears. So you kind of take this other approach, or you shine light on something not so glamorous that most people don't want to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on here? And are you just a different type of an entrepreneur, or is there more to the story?
Yeah, I think for me, it was coming from a place where I had been successful in tech, and suddenly I'm jumping into this totally new industry where, I was trying to sort of, I guess, unintentionally fake it till I made it, right, kind of thing. But it was pretty obvious that I had no idea how to gain shelf life, find distributors, all of these different, pieces along the way that I was encountering pretty early on. And the good news is that I felt like I had time to ultimately go and figure this stuff out, because like I said, we were creating a new category. And so the consumer wasn't adopting super, super fast to any of this. But I really felt like that, I had all these doubts I was just struggling with, and I had to figure out, how do I get past those doubts? And I think that the key thing that I found early on was just figuring out that I might not be able to, you know, get a distributor tomorrow, but if I just go and figure out ways to ultimately get a distributor and do the research and go into Whole Foods and start tapping people on the shoulder who look official, that are stocking beverages into the cold case, whatever. And I felt like I was making progress, and sometimes people would talk to me. Sometimes they wouldn't talk to me because they would think I was crazy, right? Like, why is she bothering me? So again, I think having your own doubts is totally normal, and particularly when you're trying to jump into a new subject or category or industry. I think that everybody has them. We might not talk about them, and then the more that we actually do talk about them while we're not obviously successful is hard too, because then people, especially your family will sit there and agree with you. Like, you're like, I don't know if I should be doing this. Oh yeah, you shouldn't. You should go back to doing what you were doing before. And it's hard, right? It's hard to hear those things, but know that that especially if you're making progress and you're doing something that is really satisfying to you, that you enjoy, then I think that that's the key thing to remember, and celebrate those wins, as I always say, along the way, but don't get stuck on the wins either, because I think that that's a whole other story that, you just have to keep moving and keep growing, and you'll run into doubts, you'll run into doubters along the way, but the key thing is just to keep going out there and trying and keep figuring out how you can, you know, increase your business size, diversify, and not be too reliant on other people making decisions for your own business, so that it ultimately can get to a point where, if you do not keep your eye on the ball and you don't have that direct relationship with the consumer, as my chapter in my book talked about with Starbucks in particular, that was really, a huge learning point for me, because I got probably too caught up in kind of the brand and the excitement of being partnered with somebody like that. And I think that happens all too often, where that business can go away tomorrow.
Absolutely. I love that last half of that point. I come from 6 seasons of basketball, college basketball. I spent 4
Mhm.
at Rhode Island and 2 at UConn. And something the coaches taught me is you don't want to celebrate your wins too high, and you also don't want to get too low on the lows and the losses, because tomorrow brings a new day, and you can turn it around like that. And that lesson, what you just said, and from my own research, it connects exactly to life, period, and to business, where
Totally.
hey, you never know. Every day's a new day, and it's a new day to, you're gonna have your ebbs and flows, and it's gonna be a roller coaster. But to not celebrate one or the other too much is definitely the approach. So that's awesome. Um, a big gap, or actually a big piece of my audience, is 18 to 34-year olds. So people coming out of high school, getting into college, getting their foot in the door in their career, trying to figure out what life is going to be for them and how they're going to impact others. This question is for pre-COVID, just to get maybe a stronger answer. But what would be your advice or tip to someone coming out of college at 22 years old? What do you wish you probably knew coming out of ASU when you were getting your 90 plus interviews lined up? Something that maybe you've obtained today that you could tell your younger self.
Yeah, I think that the key thing really is know that that it's you're probably, just because you're graduating with a whatever degree in communications or finance or whatever, it's you're not stuck in with just that one choice that you're making, right? You're just starting. And so one thing I talk about and think a lot about with my dad is that generation was, I mean, maybe they had one role job, maybe they had two at most, but today it's just not the situation, right? Where people are changing because they want to keep learning and they want to keep growing. And maybe there's a story in my book about somebody who had been in finance for a long time, and then he came into our company and he had learned a ton, and I was worried that he was basically going to get recruited out, and he really wanted to he was really interested in operations, but he didn't know exactly how to kind of make that shift. Yet operations has a ton of finance in it, in supply chain, and really trying to figure out exactly how to be most successful. And so he ended up spending some of his time while he was managing and teaching other people in finance. He ended up spending some of his time really trying to learn the operations side of the business because he wanted to grow in ways. And again, he didn't graduate with something in operations. He graduated with something in finance. But I think just being aware too that there's lots of different opportunities out there, and sometimes just because you decide to start your career in one way, and you may end up in something totally different. And I was a communications journalism major with a minor in finance, and I also talk about as a CEO. And I mean, I'll always be a founder, but 15 years later, I think one of the reasons why I've been able to remain a CEO is that I know a lot about different areas, enough to get me in trouble. As I always say, it's not, I hire people who know way more than I do, but I even know how to code. I know how to do, really, really basic things. And I think that being a CEO and kind of being a generalist and knowing lots about a lot of different things is really, really key. And I even say to entrepreneurs that don't just hire people who can kind of cover for you, right? Try and jump in and learn lots of different aspects of the business. If you don't understand SEO, or you don't understand, customer service, or maybe you think something's kind of below you in some ways, like, go spend some time with it so that you have confidence in your own ability to really learn those things. I think that's so key.
For sure. You're speaking right to my mission. And I think that times are changing. I don't think people are in one career for 40 years in the same office, same department. I think, if anything, you should have 5 careers in a lifetime, simply because
Yeah.
you're on here for a speck of time. You might as well be able to experience as much as you possibly can. And whatever else that may be, the next step, the next career, I'm sure from that previous career or the previous two, you'll be able to, grab a couple nuggets that are going to help you be hopefully extraordinary in that next position. So I think the term generalist is definitely going to be more of a buzzword if it's not already. I think that people should definitely be striving for doing different things. And I'm trying to promote lifelong learning, curiosity, always trying to see, always trying to find out what you don't know, because that's the scariest thing. None of us know what we don't know. So we have to, keep on this journey of finding that out. So that's really, really great advice. I have about 3 last kind of one-hitter questions we'll run through uh,
Yeah.
to cap off. But so we learned in the book, and we learned early on, that you are an avid reader yourself. You try to read at least 30 minutes a day within your, your busy schedule. Is there a book or a few books that you always find yourself either rereading or gifting to others?
So I'm reading a new book that I'm about halfway through right now that happens to be sitting here. It's called Atomic Habits.
Oh,
Do you know this book? It's
yes.
James Clear. Really good. That is really just about getting rid of bad habits, but also building good ones, and how you do it, which I've really, really enjoyed. I would say that one's been kind of a big favorite of mine recently. Obviously, Undaunted. I've been spending a lot of time with that. Sadly, over the last month, I have not been reading as much as I would have liked to. So that's my goal the next few weeks now. Get into the holiday and New Year season, that I'm really going to start cranking through books again.
Awesome. And what's your personal mantra, if you may have one? Is there a phrase that always pops in your head every morning? I know your dad has sent a lot your way throughout your childhood. Maybe it might be one of those, but something that kind of gets you going every day, ignites the fire in you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you said that I always think about is, what's the worst that can happen, especially if I'm scared about today, or not really sure whether or not I should go do something. I always think about what's the worst that can happen, but also I think just leading with seeing and seeing new and having experiences is something that is, definitely key. And whether I love to travel and see experiences through that, that's been challenging for 2020, for sure. But I think I still look at just finding the new, and whether that's through reading or listening to new podcasts, or just constantly looking at ways that I can ultimately grow and continue learning.
Awesome. And last question, what is your definition of extraordinary?
I would say really just going out and trying more than anything. I mean, it's amazing how many people just prevent themselves from doing that. And I think whether they're scared, or they're bored, or they believe that they're maybe too senior to continue learning, or I don't know what it is, but to me, being an extraordinaire or extraordinary is somebody who just really gets that, they'll continue to learn along the way and continue to grow is really the definition for me.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, Kara, thank you so much for again being on the show. I feel like we could talk for hours, and I'd love to have you back on down the road. If potentially there's an
Yeah.
Undaunted Part 2 coming soon or in a couple of years, but
There you go.
send people your way to Hint, to your website, to your social platforms. And I obviously will always encourage them to grab this book, especially if they are infatuated with the realm of the entrepreneurship. But thanks again. And I really thank you for the time, just simply out of all the things you have going on with, being a founder and CEO of a massive growing company.
Thank you so much. Have a great week.
Thank you. Happy holidays too.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.